Hey there, Brandon Berkmeyer here with the Podcast Branding Academy, and today we're doing our podcast walkthrough. Now, what the podcast walkthrough is we're taking you through how to create your podcast idea, set your podcast format, and name your podcast. And we'll be sharing that with multiple worksheets today. Those worksheets, which we'll show you real quick, include the Genius model for building your podcast, the idea block, the format block, naming your show, and a little section for you to take some notes. And one more quick thing before we jump in today. If you want any of these slides, just make sure you go to the bottom of the page, click the button to download all the attachments so that you can get these worksheets filled out on your own and use them along the way. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to check the link there. That'll send you right to the page. Or if you're watching it on social media, you can just comment, send me the link, and we'll shoot that over to you. All right, so we'll be going through all of that today, and let's jump into it. So what is the Genius model? Well, first off, the Genius model is not an invention of my own, but what we will do is use it to highlight how do you create a podcast idea that's focused on your audience instead of focused on you and your business. And being audience-centric is the key to a great podcast. So let's look at that real quick. So the Genius model starts with the audience in mind. So what do? We look at the centerpiece here. This is the heart of the podcast. And we're going to put that audience, like we said, in the middle, right? And then from there, there's three things. If you want to build a show that gets your audience listening and engaged, it has to start with a little bit of authority. They're looking for an expert in your field to learn from and to educate them. So authority is going to be your first priority. And then the next thing they're going to be looking for is someone who can get them to take action towards their goals. So what we're looking for in this space is influence. Influence is how you share ideas and value in a way that helps them take action. And then the last section we're going to be looking at is someone who can build trust with the audience so that they know that what you're saying is credible. And that's going to be your reputation. So we'll put that in here. And these are the three motivations for your podcast. All right, reputation is the last one, and we'll zoom out from there. All right, so to deliver on all these criteria, you need to build your podcast thoughtfully. And when we do that at the Podcast Branding Academy, we work in 3 stages with our clients. Those stages are the design stage, the development stage, and the distribution stage. In design, we talk about the idea of the show and the brand of the show. In development, we talk about your actual content creation, recording, and editing. And then in the distribution phase, we talk about how do you get your show in front of more people. So let's look at that real quick. So first, we've got the design phase, and then you have the development phase, and then you have the distribution phase over here. So let's zoom into the design phase. And every phase has 3 steps. So in the design phase, the first step is developing a great idea for your show. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And then the second step is the format of the show. And then the third is the brand of the show. All right, that's the design phase. In the development phase, you've got the setup of the show. You've got the actual content creation. And then you have the editing of the show, which we'll call the production phase. All right. And then lastly, we have your distribution, which will start with the sharing of your content. And then we have launches, which this includes not just your podcast initial launch, but also season launches, episode launches, and special series launches. And then the last will be your promotion. Okay, So this is the genius model for starting a podcast. Again, there's 3 stages. That's design, development, and distribution. And there are steps within each stage that you can take. Now, if you already have a podcast, there might be different phases in here that you can look at and say, okay, where am I strong and where am I not so strong? Today, we're going to focus on the idea and format, and we're also going to name a podcast for you. So the first section we're going to jump into is the idea block. What's your show going to be about? You have something inside of you that you want to create, maybe based on your work experience, maybe based on a passion or hobby that you're interested in. Today, we're going to talk about how to take your knowledge and turn that into a podcast idea that stands out, that gets you noticed. So one great place to start with your podcast idea is to look at your favorite topics. Your favorite topics will typically come from something like your work experience, or it'll come from something that you like to do, like your hobbies, or it might come from a passion of yours. Another place is looking at the skills that you have already and seeing what are the things that you want to develop and move forward on and grow. All of these things can be things that you talk about on a regular basis. The key is that it's something that you can talk about all the time or that you're interested in having conversations about consistently. The next is to look at your past experiences. What is helpful is to tap into the low points and the high points in your life that have defined where you are today. Now, the high points are obvious. Usually these are going to be things that really helped you get out of your shell or set you apart towards some path towards success. But the lows are usually things people avoid talking about. But this is areas or things that you've learned from along the way that made you stronger, better, faster at the thing that you're doing. So fill those in. Next, you can look at your current journey. What is something that you have extreme curiosity about and that you want to spend time learning more about or trying new things? The curiosity journey is something that when other people are starting that same journey, they might be looking for a community to learn from, and you can create a podcast that helps deliver that. The next thing to look at is your industries of interest. So you're just going to put whatever field that you work in. What is that typically called? For me, it's business or marketing or finance. Like, what is your field of interest? And write that down. Within a field of interest, there's typically some type of communities. So what do groups of people in your audience call themselves? Maybe there are CEOs that you want to work towards, or there's entrepreneurs that you want to create content for. Think of the communities that you're joining, whether there be groups or associations or Facebook groups. What are the things that you want to be able to network with and connect with that you can bring on as an audience? And then lastly, we're going to look at people of interest. So this is typically going to be who's writing the books on the topics that you're interested in, who are the influencers or the speakers on the topics you're interested in, who are people that you want to interview. Once you start looking at those people and deciding what they like to talk about, that might help you frame what you want the show to be. Those people are usually one of 3 things. They're either experts in their field, or they are some type of influencer that already has an audience, or they are what we like to call a practitioner in the field, or basically some type of professional that has a lot of experience in the topic that you are looking to create content around. So that's the starting point for an idea. Now, the starting point is just a place for you to brainstorm. This is you writing down all the potential things that you could be creating a show around. So for me, I have a varied amount of interests, right? I'm interested in business and entrepreneurial topics. I'm interested in marketing topics because that was my background and my history. And then deeper than that, I'm interested in very specific things like social media and content marketing. But they also have the personal side of things where I have my own passions, which is like I'm interested in different types of parenting advice, and I'm looking at things like sports, or I play a lot of volleyball. So these are all interests of mine. Also content creation and media. So each of these I'm just going to write on my brainstorm list so that I have these ideas starting to flow, and then I can pick from them and say, okay, what of these things am I pulled most towards that I want to create content about? All right, so zooming back out here, the next thing you're going to try to figure out is the format of your show. Now, the format of your show always starts with your audience. So think about not just all the different groups of people, because I'm sure there's lots of people that would want to listen to your show, but really you're going to try to think of one audience first, and you're going to call that your primary audience, and they're at the center of the show. Now, there might be a secondary audience that you say, you know what, these are also people that are really going to try to listen to the show that are a good fit. But again, you're going to say that they're the secondary audience. They're on the outskirts. They're not the primary focus of the show. They are someone that you might also get to listen. But really, you're trying to speak to that primary audience when you're building the show, so you have one focus for your content. And then think about, for that audience, what do they like to listen to? What types of information are they interested in? Right? You might be an accountant with accounting experience, but maybe your audience is entrepreneurs. So what kind of show does an entrepreneur want to listen to? So when you look at the categories, you can go into Apple and say, okay, what are the top level categories that Apple puts podcasts into? And those top level categories tend to be things like health or business or culture. They're very broad. And then your subcategory is going to be within that. So within business, there are subcategories that are going to be things like marketing or entrepreneurship or management, etc. And then say I pick the marketing subcategory, I'm going to want to niche down from there and say what within marketing is my field of expertise. So we're going to call that your niche. And for me, that might be something like content marketing or personal branding. Now, even when you get down to a niche, you might start to see that there's a lot of shows that are still on that same topic, and that's okay. Your goal is to be a top contender in that topic or that niche, but what's going to differentiate your show is your personal voice. The things that you stand for, that you like to talk about, that are your point of view. And I like to call it the line in the sand. So that line in the sand is going to be your one positive secret for success in the industry that you're creating content around. What is the one thing that makes people win in the thing that you're trying to help them win at? And that might be just in terms of not actual winning, but in terms of educating or improving or getting better at something. What's the one thing that makes a difference for people who are successful at it versus aren't? And then you're also going to talk about the opposite side of that equation, which creates a kind of yin versus yang, and people have to decide, do they also believe that the thing that you talk about is the one difference maker, or is it something else? And that debate is what makes for a healthy conversation. And that line in the sand starts to help develop your point of view, your perspective. And that helps either bring people towards your show or repel them away. So next we're going to talk about episode frequency, and that's going to really get into what is the type of show you want to make in terms of how often it's produced, when does it come out, how often it comes out, and what can you commit to production-wise? Because once you start a show, you don't want it to be all over the place. You want people to be able to count on how often it comes out, so that they know, is this a weekly show? Is this something that is daily? Is this going to have interviews? Is it going to be solo shows? They want to know what to expect. So the next part of format is diving into your episode frequency and deciding simply, is this something that is monthly, for example? Or maybe you want a show that is weekly, or perhaps even daily. You have to decide what kind of content you can produce on a consistent basis and how much of it you want to make. And then you have to decide, okay, well, what is the show going to be in terms of style? Am I going to do solo shows and interviews, or maybe one or the other? I like doing both because a solo show helps to highlight my personal knowledge, and an interview brings on other people. And if they talk about my show to their audience, that helps both of us. But also, if there's someone that is a highly recognized influential guest, that also makes my show look better. That is an association that I want for my show. So picking your episode type definitely helps frame the brand of your show. Now, the rest of the things you can consider are, do you want to co-host, right? Or do you want some kind of panel discussion? So decide going in, how often do you want to produce it, and what kind of shows do you want to make? And then lastly, is this something that you want to be scripted or unscripted? So with scripted, that's where you're going to ahead of time have designed exactly, the beginning, middle, and end of your show, and even write out a script for that. Unscripted is really just having categories that you talk about, and then each week you kind of riff from there. So do you want scripted or unscripted? And if you want scripted, is there then going to be some type of sound design or something else that makes this even more professional? So that's up to you. Most of the people who are independent podcasts are going with some type of unscripted format where they bullet out their ideas and then they just talk from their top of mind, which is why it's important to have something, a topic that you are passionate about, that you already have a lot of information to share. All right, so moving on from there, we're going to look at the name block here. Now, I'll tell you, you might already have a name in your head for this show, and that's totally okay. What I would say is use this name block to confirm, maybe are you using best practices for the name you've picked? Maybe you have a great word, but you need a better adjective, or you need to add some kind of subtitle to your show to help it really serve you as a podcast name. So what I love about shows is if you can brainstorm them along the way and start keeping a running list, then you'll be better off when you actually make the final selection. So in this naming section, this is where you're going to brainstorm and keep a running list of the show titles as you go over the next couple months and you're recording content. And then also as you come up with new titles, I would also go and look up, is there a website that is available for that podcast title? Because as you want to promote your show, you're going to want to send them somewhere. And typically it's a website that has the same name as your show. And then after you secure that, while you're looking for it, you might even see that there's words available that are close to what you were thinking for the show title. And you might change the show title based on what the website is that's available. A couple of things to think about as you're coming up with these names. One is your category words. So this is basically thinking about what keywords are used in the industry that you're talking about. So it might be a top level word, like if it's a marketing podcast, do you want to have the word marketing in the title? Or do you want to have the word advertising in the title or something along those lines so people instantly recognize what the show is about? So for me, it's going to be keywords or anything that's super topical to your industry. And then what are industry words? It's another thing to start to write down. So industry words are going to be words that are commonly used in your vernacular. So if you're a finance podcast, the common words might be things like money or wealth or investing. So what are the common words that are used in your industry? Things that are sometimes in the news or that are even possibly trends in your industry. What are those words? Write those down. Again, these might not be the final title, but they might end up being some kind of describing word for your show. If it's not in the title, maybe it ends up in the description. And then look at your audience words. What do the people that you want to listen to your show call themselves? Are they, for example, 7-figure business owners? Are they entrepreneurs? Maybe they are marketers, or they are someone who's seeking fitness advice, or they are go-getters. What are the words that are used to describe your audience? And a lot of the time, those words could be in your title. Like if it's a marketing show, is it marketing for entrepreneurs or is it marketing for leaders, for example? You can see how that starts to change what the feeling of the show is in terms of who it's for. Lastly, what I love is describing words. What are some of the adjectives or adverbs that help describe your show? Why is this important? Well, you could have 10 podcasts all with marketing keywords in their title, but is there some type of describing word that helps create the personality of your show? So if you're a money show, maybe it's money mayhem to kind of describe how crazy the market is, or it's magnificent money, right? Something that helps establish your priority. There's a lot of, for example, CEO shows for women, and it's like Boss Babe or something like that, or anything that has some kind of alliteration is usually helpful in terms of people remembering the name. So think about the adjectives and then maybe something that has like similar rhyming or structure in terms of the words you actually use. So that's the name block. Now what I would say is, again, use this as a brainstorm. And along those 3 months or so that you're developing your show, or maybe it's a few weeks for you, depending on how fast you're moving, as you're developing your show, start to write those brainstorm names down and don't pick one until the very end. But start to keep this running list. Use this document as a live document, a living document that you can change and update until you really feel secure about the name of your show. And then you can try it out. Tell people about it and see what they say about the name of the show and how they react. Introduce it to a couple of potential podcast guests and see if that seems to have some kind of interest or rhythm for them. So use this as a way to develop that and then move forward. So again, we have a notes section here as well. So as you're going through this, if there was another idea or thought that came through, you're welcome to look at and write down your own notes here. And then just go through and each step of the way, make sure you're looking at, what am I doing to design the show, develop the show, and distribute it. As you're going, each of these will need their own focus, their own intention, so that you create something that is not just like every other podcast out there, but that has its own flavor, its own quality of creation, and that is actually out there in front of people, that is being shared and launched and promoted so that people can find it. That's what it takes to get a show built. That's our podcast walkthrough for the day. Hope you guys found it useful. And if you guys are looking to download the worksheets, just make sure to click on the button on the page. Or if this is on YouTube, there should be a link to where you can download it. Or if you're watching it on social media, just comment, send me the link, and we'll shoot it right over to you. Hope you found it useful, and we will catch you guys next time.